What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. Jeremy the Machine Scott here. Today we're going to talk about type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers, and if you listen to this video you're going to realize why it's important to know about each type of muscle fiber and which one you're using based off of your style of training and what kind of workouts and what kind of exercises that you're doing in the gym, and how to maximize your results and how to put on maximum amount of muscle. Or if you're an endurance athlete like a marathon runner or a triathlete or a boxer or some type of aerobic sport, how to maximize your performance at the sport that you're doing. First, let's talk about type 1 muscle fibers versus type 2 muscle fibers. The difference between type 1 muscle fibers and type 2 muscle fibers is type 1 contracts slowly and type 2 contract at a faster rate. We all have both in our body. We all have type 1 and we all have type 2 muscle fibers. Your genetics determine what type of ratio of type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers you have. Some people are born and have more type 1, and some people are born and have more type 2. And that's where genetics come into play. So if you see somebody who's naturally a little bit more muscular and they're better at explosive sports like sprinting and things like that require explosive movements like Olympic lifting, maybe a bodybuilder who has really good genetics, they probably have more of the type 2 muscle fibers. If there's somebody who's good at running long distance and any type of sport that requires any swimming, anything like that, they have more of the type 1 muscle fiber. They were born that way. So we all, based off of our genetics, have a certain amount. Some people have 80% more or whatnot of either type 1 or type 2. Type 1 muscle fibers are aerobic and type 2 muscle fibers are anaerobic. So when I say aerobic, what am I referring to? So if you're doing activities like a Zumba class, or you're trying to run a marathon, or you're doing long distance on a bike, that's aerobic, and you're using type 1 muscle fibers, and those have more endurance. Type 2 is anaerobic. If you're in the weight room and you're doing flat bench press and you're doing a heavy set of 8 to 10 reps, you're using type 2 muscle fibers. When you're lifting that amount of weight and using that type of muscle fiber at that intensity, that's anaerobic, okay? It doesn't require much endurance, but it does require strength, okay? And it can give out a lot more force. That's how you know that you're using type 2. If you're doing weights in the gym and you're doing 25 to 30 reps, you are using your type 1 muscle fiber. That is anaerobic. Type 2 muscle fiber has two categories. There's type 2A and type 2B. Type 1 muscle fiber is just type 1 by itself. Type 2A is a combination of both type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers. It's a combination of aerobic and anaerobic. Type 2B muscle fibers are only anaerobic and they're known as glycotic fibers. Both type 2A and type 2B are muscle fibers that fire rapidly. Both muscle fibers produce ATP. What is ATP? ATP is adenosine triphosphate. That's what your body uses for energy when you're working out. Type 1 muscle fibers give a slow release of ATP. Type 2 muscle fibers give a shorter release of ATP. That's why you need to rest when you're lifting heavy weights. You need to rest a little bit longer between your sets to get ready for your next set and to get ready for the next exercise and so forth, to continue lifting heavy weights during your whole workout. If you shorten up your rest periods during your workout, if you're only doing 15 to 20 second breaks in between your sets, you're not going to be lifting as heavy and you're going to be working more on endurance. And then you're going to start to most likely use your type 1 muscle fibers. The amount of weight that you're going to be able to lift is going to go down. Type 2 muscle fibers have very low resistance to fatigue, so they're going to get fatigued faster. That's why you don't see a big bodybuilder doing, boxing or running marathons and so forth like that. It's a different type of physique consisting mainly of type 1 muscle fibers. Based off of your genetics and what type of muscle fiber that your body mainly consists of, whether it be type 1 or type 2, whichever one of those your body has more of is going to determine what type of athlete you are. So if you're a long distance runner and you're good at it, most likely you have more of type 1 muscle fibers in your body. If you're a weightlifter or a power lifter, most likely you have more of the type 2 muscle fibers in your body. The type of muscle fibers that your body mainly consists of determines whether you are fast or strong. And some of the best people who are good at endurance sports have mainly about somewhere around 80% of slow twitch muscle fibers. People who are good at explosive sports like sprinting, weightlifting, bodybuilders with really good genetics have mainly about 80%, somewhere around there, of type 2 muscle fibers, which is the fast twitch. However, don't get it twisted. Fiber type is only a small part of an athlete's performance. And we all know that a lot more goes into an athlete's performance, like what? Recovery, diet, self-discipline, mindset. You cannot ignore these factors. If you don't have these, I don't care what kind of genetics you have, you're not gonna be good at a sport, or you're not gonna have a good physique. You can't be lazy. You can't just depend on your genetics and genetics alone. Hard work always wins. So based off of your genetics, you're born with a certain ratio of fast twitched to slow twitch muscle fibers, or type 2 to type 1 muscle fibers. Genetics play a huge role. If you're doing an exercise where the muscle is under tension for about 10 seconds or less, for example, a heavy set of bench press or a heavy set of bicep curls, if your set is lasting 10 seconds or less because of the amount of weight that you're lifting, you're using type 2 muscle fibers. If you're doing a set where the muscle contractions are taking 30 seconds or longer, or 60 seconds, if you're doing lightweight, if you're taking a body pump class at the gym or a aerobics class at the gym where you're lifting light weights for a long period of time, for a lot of reps, 20, 30 reps, you're definitely using type 1 muscle fiber. So if you want to be strong or explosive, but you weren't blessed with a lot of type 2 muscle fibers, does that mean give up, say it wasn't meant for you? No, it doesn't. So if you weren't blessed with more type 2 muscle fibers than type 1 muscle fibers, and you want to be a strength athlete, or you want to do a sport that requires you to be explosive, don't give up, don't quit, don't say it's not for me. There's hope for you. Some evidence shows that you can theoretically make the cross-section size of the type 2 muscle fibers bigger. You can't increase the number of type 2 muscle fibers that you have, but training heavy at 5 to 8 reps and doing explosive training and training those type 2 muscle fibers will increase the cross-section size of the fibers. Training heavy, training explosive will increase the cross-sectional size of the type 2 muscle fibers. So you can train those fibers and you can get better at a sport even if you don't have, or if you were not genetically blessed with a lot of type 2 muscle fibers and so forth, even with the type 1 muscle fibers. If you weren't blessed with a lot of type 1 muscle fibers and you want to train yourself for a sport that requires a lot of endurance, you can still train those type 1 muscle fibers and you can still get better and you can still get more endurance. If you want to get bigger, if you want to get stronger, make sure you're lifting the right amount of weight. Make sure you're going heavy enough and make sure that you're training your type 2 muscle fibers. Make sure that you're resting long enough in between your sets. The sweet spot is about 60 to 90 seconds in between your sets, and that's how you know that you're training your type 2 muscle fibers. 10 reps, 8 reps, 6 reps. If you're challenging yourself and you're going heavy enough and you're getting a lower amount of reps, then you know you're hitting your type 2 muscle fibers. If you're doing 15, 20, 25, 30, then there's a good chance that you're hitting mainly type 1 muscle fibers. Unless, of course, you're going heavy and then doing a drop set. You're hitting both. So where does that leave us? Genetics might hold us back, but only to a certain point. You can't just give up and throw in the towel and say you weren't blessed with good genetics. You can still increase the size of your type 2 muscle fibers and you can still get more endurance of your type 1 muscle fibers. It's just gonna be a little bit harder for some of us than it is for others. But don't give up. You gotta try. You might have to try a little bit harder than others because you weren't genetically blessed, but it doesn't matter. You still have to work hard. And even if you were genetically blessed, you still have to work hard. You still have to have self-discipline. You still have to eat the right foods, and you still have to make sure that you're being consistent day in and day out. So what kind of workouts should you be doing if you are an endurance athlete? High reps. If you're a marathon runner, high reps, 25, 30 reps, short rest periods in between your sets. If you want to be a bodybuilder, if you want to put on size, if you want your muscles to grow, keep your reps down a little bit lower, maybe rest just a little bit longer in between your sets. Occasionally switching up the workout with shorter rest periods, that's fine, but for the most part, you need to keep your rest periods 60 to 90 seconds in between sets so you can lift more weight, so you can put on more muscle, so you can transform your physique. If you don't eat the right foods, if you don't have self-discipline, if you are not consistent, then forget it. You will not put on muscle, you will not get more endurance. You have to take these things seriously. You cannot take these things lightly. You cannot just rely only on genetics and genetics alone. You have to put in the work. You have to make the sacrifice. Make sure you subscribe, hit that like button down below. Until next time.